Howdy. It's been a minute since one of these, an article review. Something I've said I would do more of, and here we are. Despite all intentions and lack of follow through, we're back in it. Easy introduction. We're going to be doing a couple of these from the most recent edition of Let Me Actually Get a Grip on It. This right here Psychology Today. Look at that. Colorful, themed, and full of articles. I'm not going to do all of them, just the ones I find interesting. But we'll start off simple. Who We're Drawn to by Sebastian Aucklenberg. Very brief article. It's got some interesting data that I'm going to share and maybe do some extra inference on or just leave it as that. But point being, this research between a lot of European countries and Israel, between just under 36,000 couples. So that's a pretty good sample size. If you've watched these before, sometimes I'm critical of the sample size they use, but that's great. But what the research was based around age preferences for partners and if men and women are different. I think most people probably understand that men and women are not quite equal when it comes to their age preference for partner. The studies that I had seen from, I think it was data collected through dating apps. I don't know if it was exclusively Tinder or just one of them or multiple, but found that as women aged, they wanted a partner roughly their same age. But as men age, they consistently wanted a partner that was like 22. Uh, so it doesn't matter how old they got, they wanted a 22-year-old. And now this wasn't necessarily a relationship. Bear in mind, this is a dating app. So we're not filtering out people who are just looking for hookups. So, you know, not a long term relationship. That's something to be mindful of. Whereas this data is looking at long term. So in a situation where it's a dating app where people can have anything from long term to a hookup, men had pretty much no change in wanting like a 22-year-old all the time. But women typically aged with, or their preference aged with them. This research on partner preference was a bit more interesting. Um, what it essentially showed is that men start by wanting someone around their own age, but every few years that they age, I'll put it this way, they age faster than their preference does. So I think the example it gave was about for every 5 years they aged, the preferred age of a partner grew by about one additional year. So that means at age 25, and I'm reading from the text here, an average man typically partnered with a woman 3 years younger. So a 25-year-old guy typically interested in a 22-year-old woman. So, but by age 60, they had a preference towards a 50-year-old woman, generally speaking. So that age gap had gone to 10 years by the time they were 60. Um, some of the perceived reason for this is connected to that old understanding that we have of men often preferring like child rearing women. Like there's something psychological that you want someone who could have a kid, even though a lot of 50-year-old women couldn't. But there's this like pull towards younger in terms of that ability, so to speak. But they found that for women, let me get the number right. It was that they preferred uh, younger men as they aged, but older men when they were younger. For instance, at age 25, women reported a 28-year-old partner as ideal. But by age 60, they reported being more likely to be with a man a year younger than they are. So they actually had to have a similar process where they prefer older when they're younger and younger when they're older. Not as dramatic as men, which I find interesting because by the time they're older, both prefer a younger partner, which to me feels like a clash in some sense. For dating an older age, I feel like when you're younger, you're both kind of looking for the same thing. 28-year-old guy matching with a 25-year-old woman fits both of their preferences. But when they're both in their 60s, it sounds like the guy wants a 50-year-old and the woman wants like a 59-year-old, give or take. So just an interesting um, interesting piece of data. If you're watching this, I don't necessarily want people just putting in here's the age I prefer, but just curious how this resonates. I don't have a lot of input for that. It's just something to notice. I think there's an understandable uh, desire for certain ages, maybe. That's not necessarily a problem. But as you can see, even as time goes on, they're not dramatic. The most dramatic example here is at age 60 per 50-year-old. Now that'll continue moving, and people do get remarried in their 90s and things like that. But yeah, just some interesting tidbits of info. So not much more to that. Thought it was very interesting and research that I hadn't heard. I'd only heard this in regards to dating apps. So this was actually wildly different compared to dating apps where I said the men prefer to stay at age 22 versus this. It says when they're 60, they prefer 50. So the difference between what dating apps provide versus what people are looking for when we're specifying that they're talking about a partner preference. So that's cool to know that when people want to spend their life with someone and they don't really mind aging with that person. But if people are less interested in that through all of the options on a dating app, it gets a little bit more superficial. So yeah, just something cool. So yeah, that's that.